We are the Fantastic Six. My name is Reggie.
My name is Lily.
I'm Mike.
I'm also Mike.
I'm Gregory. I'm Sean.
And today we're going to be presenting on Google's structure and culture. So just to go over the agenda a little bit, first we're going to start off with the interview, and then we're going to go into structure and culture, and speak a little bit about the strengths and weaknesses and the issues of concern and our recommendations on how to better those, and then any questions you guys have.
So for our interview, we interviewed Kelly Francis. She works at Google, and many of you know, but Google is a technology company focused on internet-related services and products. And specifically, Kelly works for Waymo, which is their self-driving division, and she's a controller in that division, which is in their finance area. So for Google's structure, there's three main things that kind of define how Google is structured, and those are the cross-functional teams, which are all product and project-based, and then the flatness of Google, which we'll describe later. So for the cross-functional teams, basically what a cross-functional team is a team made up of people from all different divisions, for example, finance, marketing, developers, testers, and they all come together to form a team. Mark, Susan, and Robert are all university professors in management across the country, and they discovered that there are three main differences from traditional team structure to cross-functional teams. And so cross-functional teams, usually there's distinct responsibility of each member, and they're always temporary and project-driven, and they also have a common goal in mind. And then these three authors also recognize that there's three things that successful cross-functional teams all have. And one, they all have aligned projects. So like we said, with that common goal, each person on the team is working towards that common goal and for that one project. And then they have the right people, which technically means that all the people on the team are good at communicating with each other and they fit well and have common norms. And then internal and external communication, this basically just means that we talk about internal communication within the teams, but it's important for cross-functional teams to have external communication as well so that they can communicate with the other teams across Google. Each of these cross-functional teams is project-based. So as you can see here, there's project 1, 2, 3, and 4. And for project 1, they have a marketing manager, a finance manager, operations manager, and HR manager. And so all these 4 different managers have people under them, but they basically all come together to form one team. When I was talking about Kelly, she was in the Waymo project, and so she was in finance, and she was working with marketing people and operations and HR as well. And when she was talking about the project-based structure, she said that she loved it because it made it feel like the company had a small company feel. And then moving on to the flatness at Google, Google doesn't necessarily have a flat structure, but what Kelly was telling us, it does feel like it has a flatness to it. And so Nathaniel Smithson, which is a business writer, wrote that this flatness at Google really minimizes the hierarchy and employees can bypass middle management and they're much better for sharing across teams. And then when Kelly was talking about the flatness, she said it's really beneficial to the company because it places more importance on ideas and intelligence than on titles, which I thought was really interesting. And that there's much more involvement from all employees because of the flatness at Google. So these three things really make up the structure at Google, and they do have strengths and weaknesses to them.
How do you manage creative people? Google is all about innovation and people are its biggest assets, especially creative people. So as my colleague Lily was saying, flatness is a really important part of it. And cross-functional teams, if you look closely, the biggest strength of it is that there is no conventional hierarchical structures. So you don't have an employee addressing to a middle manager going to upper manager going to CEO. You always work on your team. You do have another employee overseeing the operations, but generally you have just employees working together to solve a specific problem, which is really efficient for a company like Google. Another strength of Google is that another strength of the system Google is utilizing is that it promotes team pride and trust. If you always work in the same team to solve a specific problem for a project, you have to bond with those people. You see them every day. You eat lunch together. You solve problems together, and you become a very efficient working unit, which is good for the company. And the biggest thing is that cross-functional team structure really helps with innovation, because you have a group of people from different departments, you give them a specific problem, and they just work to solve it, which is really good for innovation. It's much more efficient than to just force people to do specific assignments, and to review overviews and reports to the management, as it usually goes in the companies. But nevertheless, there are some disadvantages of this structure. For example, since it is relatively new, there is not enough research about it, and there probably are some disadvantages we don't even know about. But out of the stuff which is more or less studied already, there is this article by Harvard Business Report, which basically states that only 76% of cross-functional teams which were implemented actually turned out being successful. So if a company invests a lot of money into reorganizing a structure, there is still a 25% chance that the company will be inefficient, and they just made it worse for themselves. Next thing I'm going to talk about is project-based teams. Google is all about projects, because you have specific departments doing specific products, specific services. It usually is always organized as a project. So there are some pros and cons of having a project, which is the biggest part. I would say the biggest advantage of having a project-based teams is that you have flexibility. You can put different people together. You have engineering department, you have sales department, and you can put them on the same project, and so that the salespeople can make sure that, for example, a new game or a new service or a new YouTube subscription idea would be more user-friendly, because very often you have engineers developing a code which is not really comprehensible for an average consumer. And combining people like that from different backgrounds really helps Google to make their products more marketable. Another thing is that when you organize your employees based on a project, it really helps them to focus, because your success and your rate of success is usually is only tied to how efficient is the project you've developed. You don't have just long-term goals. You have a project, employee focuses on that project. The project goes out well, employee works well. The project doesn't go well, employee doesn't work well. Simple and efficient. But there are some disadvantages. When employees only focus on one specific project, they tend to not see the long-term goal, and it makes it really hard for upper management to coordinate it all together. You can end up with having a bunch of good gears, but you can't really put them all together because all the gears are different, because all the different project teams don't really coordinate a lot. And the last thing is that not every employee is well suited for a constantly changing environment, because usually in a project-based team structure, the environment of the employees have to work in is constantly evolving, constantly changing. You have new products developing, you have new projects you work on, and you end up with every day being different, and not every employee is well suited for that. So an employer has to address it and make sure that the employees they hire will be very suitable for situations like this.
There are many different aspects that make the culture at Google so great. One of their cornerstones is their mission statement: to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. Obviously, this is a pretty much impossible task. However, it unites the entire employee base under the common goal. A couple of their key values are technology innovation is their lifeblood, do the right thing, don't be evil, and earn customer trust, loyalty, and respect every day. When we spoke to Kelly about this environment, she told us it was a fun, innovative, and trustful atmosphere with an emphasis on employee motivation and happiness. It was also ranked the #1 best tech company culture in 2019 by Business Insider. Using Quinn Rohrbaugh's competing values framework theory, there are 4 common types of company culture. The first type being clan-type culture. An example of this would be Tom's Shoes Company, which places an emphasis on a relationship between the customer and the employee. Next on the list would be a hierarchy type culture. A good example of this would be McDonald's, when there's plenty of positions and rules and guidelines for everyone to follow. Another example of a market type culture would be General Electric under its previous CEO, who forced each business sector to come in either 1 or 2 in terms of market share, or they would be sold off. And finally, we get to adhocracy, which Google fulfills perfectly. They have a flexible, adaptable, and more informal way of handling their marketing culture. They have an ability to quickly develop new services and products to capture market share that sets them apart from their competitors. Without this type of culture, Google wouldn't be what it is today.
So some observable artifacts at Google are that around the campuses, the office campuses, you'll find bikes and scooters that will make traveling between buildings a lot easier. Offices are also named and decorated after the countries they're located in. Very few solo offices were made. This means that most of them are campus type office. That means there's a lot of offices, a lot of buildings around the area that you can travel to and work between. Besides that, there's laptop and internet access around all the campus, so you don't have to worry about if you want to sit outside and do some work. You're more than welcome to. It's very friendly and very open to the employees. It's very free to them. And besides those things, there's also multiple cafes that offer free food, including breakfast, lunch, and dinner to all the employees. And so Google does a great job at making sure these employees feel like they're being taken care of inside the offices. And so some strengths and weaknesses of Google's culture. We start out with the strengths. So obviously the adhocracy culture, it shows a much higher levels of job satisfaction. Culture works with the structure, so the culture and structure work together to influence the capabilities of the organization. It's open, it's innovative, it's smart with emphasis on excellence, and the environment is very hands-on, so all employees are working together like the cross-functional teams. And then it's focused on enhancing employee performance. Then there's the company ensures products meet industry standards, and they are the leading in technologies. So some weaknesses with the culture though is that sharing occurs in a controlled manner. So because groups they like to focus on what they're working on, they don't tend to share a lot of their information with other group members, or not group members, but other groups, so that they don't steal ideas or steal their thoughts and get credit for them. There's also the reward system is based on launch of products, so it doesn't matter if you're an engineer that's working on the code of a product that already exists. If you're really good at your job and you're not working on a new product, the reward is not very likely to occur. There's a lot of peer pressure to spend a lot of time in the office. So like Google does offer a lot of benefits and perks to the employees, but this might make it seem like they're trying to keep their employees locked in the office, making them spend a lot of their time and most of their day in the offices. Once you actually start working at Google, a lot of people have said that they offer very little guidance on the job that you're going to be doing. So it's basically like you have to figure everything out for yourself. And contractors, so like people like Kelly that works for Waymo, which is basically a sub-department or like a contracted department of Google. They don't get offered all the same benefits. They do get to enjoy some of the benefits, but not all the same ones. And then there's not much loyalty to employees, as in that Google won't try to fight their employees from like leaving the company and getting new startups. They don't really like try to keep their employees in if they're looking for other opportunities.
So to speak a little bit about the issues of concerns around the structure of Google. One of the issues of concerns is the division due to political differences. So Google claims that it has developed a structure of free speech and communication, but recently Google was accused of censoring political speech. One example is Kevin Cernicki. He was a Republican engineer whose conservative take on political and social issues caused him to get fired. And this is obviously very bad because it sets a tone of not being able to express your true beliefs. Another issue is privacy. So in 2010, Google had to exit China due to their strict censorship laws. And in 2017, they began to work on Project Dragonfly. This is basically just a censorship of search results and content that is tailored around the Chinese market. So whatever the Chinese government wants people to see, they'll be able to see. A lot of people were upset by this and began to protest, and which led to Google eventually dropping the project. And this also goes into consumer trust. So recently, Google has been found selling consumer data, which many people are obviously upset about because they feel like their privacy has been invaded. This sets a bad tone between Google and the consumers, which obviously will lower business and make things worse if that's the case. So a few issues of concern around culture. A big one is sexual harassment. 48 people have been fired for sexual harassment in the last 2 years. This upset many people, and they walked out in protest, which is a picture right there, as you can see. Another one is valuing higher level of employees. So an example of this is Andy Rubin, who was accused of sexually harassing another employee. He was high up, and it was proven that he actually did it, and he still got to walk away with a $90 million exit package, which also upset many people because they're valuing higher employees and not, he's basically being rewarded for what he did. Another big issue is the gender gap. About 31% of Google's global workforce is women, and 26% of its executives are women. This needs to be, these need to be higher numbers, obviously. And in Google's recent annual report, it was shown that women are being greatly underpaid.
So some recommendations that we have for Google is we know they have a great cross-functional structure, as Lily previously mentioned. And Google is really well known for this unique structure, and a lot of companies use it as a role model for themselves. And we recommend they keep this structure going forward to continue to be successful as they've been. Also, as Reggie previously mentioned, secrecy problems like the Project Dragonfly that was a censored Chinese search engine. The company should avoid issues like this in the future and emphasize transparency and the sharing of information at all levels in order to improve the company structure. Google also needs to address the various sexual harassment charges. The company has had many issues involving sexual harassment in the past. These concerns need to be addressed starting at the top in order to make an impact at the lower levels and ensure their employees have a safe and welcome environment. Also, as Reggie mentioned, they need to value all employees equally. Google needs to place more value in their employees to promote equality through the workplace. High-level executives such as Andy Rubin should face the same punishment that any employee would face in similar situations. Google will gain from viewing all their employees as equally vital to their success. And these are references and more references. So are there any questions or comments? Let us know.